17 minutes. Iranian strike systems hit 3 separate bases in Syria at 14:32 local time 47 minutes ago. This is not a skirmish. This is the single largest combat aircraft loss the United States has suffered since Vietnam. $4.7 billion worth of aircraft reduced to burning wreckage. 23 pilots confirmed dead. 11 more missing and presumed dead. 3 separate installations hit with a level of precision that Pentagon officials are still struggling to explain. But here is what almost everyone is missing right now. Trump just authorized Operation Iron Fury, a total air campaign against Iranian military infrastructure with no congressional consultation and no coalition building. It begins within hours tonight. What Iran does next will determine whether this stays regional or goes global, because Russia just scrambled aircraft at Latakia. The dominoes are falling and the sequence matters more than anything else right now. To understand how we got here, you need to know what happened 24 hours ago. On Saturday, Iranian-backed militias hit Al Tanf base with a drone swarm. 17 drones, minimal damage, 2 American personnel wounded. At the time, it looked like a harassment attack. What it actually was reconnaissance. Iran was testing American response times, probing for gaps in air defense coverage, looking for weaknesses in the radar networks, and timing exactly how long it took for counter-drone systems to activate. 18 hours later, they had found every gap they were looking for. That drone swarm was never meant to cause serious damage. It was a data collection mission. By Sunday morning, Iranian targeting data was confirmed accurate. They knew exactly what to hit, exactly when to hit it, and exactly how to do it before any meaningful American response was possible. American forward air bases stood exposed as fundamentally vulnerable to coordinated multi-vector strikes. Regional deterrence posture collapsed in 17 minutes. Every ally across the region is now watching American losses mount and quietly calculating their own exposure to the same kind of attack. Today's strike was not militia activity. This was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iranian military proper, uniformed personnel operating sophisticated weapon systems. That distinction matters enormously under international law because it converts this from proxy harassment into direct state-on-state conflict. This is the shift that military planners feared for years, but few expected to arrive this fast. Trump's response is not optional in any meaningful sense. It is existential for American credibility across the entire region. Every ally from Riyadh to Tel Aviv is watching right now to see whether the United States absorbs this attack or responds to it. Absorbing it without a serious response means the effective end of American deterrence in the Middle East, full stop. Here is exactly what happened in those 17 minutes. The first wave came at 14:32 when 12 cruise missiles hit Al Tanf airfield simultaneously with no warning and no intercepts. Direct hits on aircraft shelters and the main ready room. The second wave came minutes later as ballistic missiles struck the Deir ez-Zor fuel depot, a completely different weapon system fired from a completely different launch location, deliberately demonstrating distributed operational capability across multiple sites. At 14:41, the third wave arrived when kamikaze drone swarms hit the Hama fighter squadron during an emergency scramble. Pilots were physically running to their aircraft when the drones arrived. At 14:49, the attack ended. Iranian state television was broadcasting footage within minutes of the final impact. They had cameras pre-positioned at the target areas. They knew precisely what they were going to hit, and they documented it before the smoke had cleared. The sequence of those 3 waves matters more than any individual strike element. 3 separate bases hit in 17 minutes, deliberately coordinated to prevent aircraft from relocating between strikes. If Iran had hit one base repeatedly, that would signal limited capability tied to a single launch site. Hitting 3 simultaneously signals a distributed launch network with overwhelming capacity operating across a wide geographic area. The specific details from the initial Pentagon damage assessment fill in the rest of the picture. At Al Tanf, 22 F-15E Strike Eagles were destroyed on the ground. Pilots were inside the ready room when the building collapsed from a direct cruise missile impact. Most of the casualties occurred in that single building in those first seconds. At Deir ez-Zor, the fuel depot explosion spread immediately to an adjacent maintenance hangar, and 11 F-16s were destroyed by fire rather than direct impact, with secondary damage proving more destructive than the primary strikes themselves. At Hama, 17 F-35s were caught during their takeoff roll by the drone swarm. Pilots had seconds to react and most did not eject in time. Some aircraft were still moving when they were hit. Each of those details directly constrains American response options in the hours ahead. The ground destruction at Al Tanf means no aircraft survived there to retaliate immediately. The planes that could have struck back in the first hour are burning wreckage on the runway. The fuel depot fire at Deir ez-Zor means remaining aircraft across the region cannot refuel for extended missions without entirely new logistics chains being established first. This leaves carrier-based aviation as the only immediate strike capability available right now, and carrier aviation operating from the Mediterranean requires a minimum of 12 hours to position itself for sustained combat operations over Iran. Iran's leverage becomes completely clear when you map out the actual response options available to Washington tonight. If America retaliates from carriers alone, it is working with limited strike capacity, and Iran absorbs manageable damage while claiming victory for surviving the American response intact. If America waits for land-based reinforcements to arrive before striking, Iran uses that window to fortify positions, move mobile launchers, harden targets, and bury critical systems deeper underground. If America escalates immediately to strategic bombing of the Iranian homeland, Russia has treaty obligations with Syria, and China is watching every move for implications regarding Taiwan. Every available path is a losing proposition for Washington and a winning narrative for Tehran, regardless of which option gets chosen. The evidence that this attack was planned months in advance is overwhelming once you look at the timeline. Iranian military exercises last month practiced this exact scenario, running coordinated multi-vector strikes against simulated American positions with American-style defenses. The Pentagon dismissed it publicly as routine training. It was a full dress rehearsal. 4 months of satellite positioning work went into identifying exact aircraft locations at all 3 bases. 3 months of drone stockpiling at distributed sites across the region. 1 month of targeting verification using commercial satellite imagery that anyone can purchase. This was not reactive planning. It was a calculated operation designed to inflict maximum damage in minimum time before any response was physically possible. The timing on a Sunday afternoon was deliberately chosen because weekend staffing at American bases is minimal, the response chain is slower, and decision makers are scattered. CENTCOM Commander General Kurilla was in transit when the attack began. 37 minutes passed before he reached secure communications. By the time he did, it was already over. Iranian IRGC Commander Salami appeared on state television at 15:45 and declared that the era of American impunity in their region had ended. That is not militia rhetoric. That is a state-level declaration of a new strategic reality. Trump's response came at 16:22. He announced that Iran would pay a price they cannot imagine, that a total air campaign had been authorized, and that Operation Iron Fury would destroy Iran's ability to wage war beginning that night. Within 3 hours of the attack, the cascade of consequences was already in motion. The Pentagon confirmed the casualty count at 23 dead and 11 missing. CENTCOM ordered all remaining Syria-based aircraft to relocate immediately to Iraq and Jordan. The USS Gerald Ford Carrier Group was ordered to flank speed toward the eastern Mediterranean, currently 14 hours from optimal strike position. Speaker Johnson called an emergency House session for Monday morning. Russian forces at Latakia Air Base went to their highest alert status with 8 Su-35s scrambled and holding patterns established. Turkey formally requested NATO Article 4 consultation. Not Article 5 collective defense, but formal security consultation that signals serious concern about where escalation leads. Israel raised its IDF alert level to the highest point since October 7th, canceled all leave, and authorized a reserve call without yet implementing it. Oil futures spiked 23% in after-hours trading to $127 a barrel and still climbing. Defense stocks jumped 8 to 12% across the sector. Gold hit $3,400 per ounce, the highest price in recorded history. 3 hours. That is how fast this moved from a regional military incident toward a potential global crisis. Iran did not wait passively for American aircraft to take off before responding. 2 hours after Trump's announcement, before a single American plane had launched, Iran was already moving. At 1830, Supreme Leader Khamenei authorized full defensive mobilization with all IRGC units placed on combat status nationwide. At 1847, the Iranian Navy deployed 3 Ghadir-class submarines from Bandar Abbas, with their destination unknown but their suspected objective being the Strait of Hormuz choke point. Iran's foreign minister simultaneously contacted the Russian and Chinese ambassadors, and face-to-face meetings in Tehran were confirmed for that same night. Iran is not positioning to absorb American strikes passively. They are pre-positioning for extended conflict across every available domain at once. Their calculation appears to be that they need to demonstrate American retaliation will not be cost-free, that they can close the Strait of Hormuz if struck severely enough, and that drawing Russia and China into diplomatic and possibly military support creates enough complexity to prevent a quick American victory narrative. What they are trying to prevent is a swift, decisive strike that threatens regime survival. What they are willing to risk is significant military infrastructure damage, economic isolation, and possible strikes on nuclear facilities. The Russian dimension complicates everything in ways that Washington has no clean answer for. At 2030 Moscow time, Vladimir Putin issued an emergency statement saying Russia cannot remain indifferent to the destruction of a strategic partner, and that all options to support Iranian sovereignty are being considered. Russia has 3,500 military personnel at 4 bases in Syria, S-400 air defense systems capable of threatening American aircraft, Su-35 fighter jets, nuclear-capable hypersonic missiles. None of these are currently targeting American assets, but all of them can be repositioned within hours. What Russia actually wants is straightforward. Every American aircraft, missile, and pilot committed to Iran is one that is not available for Ukraine support. Russia benefits from an extended American-Iranian conflict regardless of how it ultimately ends. Strategic distraction at zero cost to Moscow. By 21G, Russian aircraft from Latakia had already repositioned 30 kilometers closer to American flight paths over Syria, not engaging, positioning. Neither Washington nor Tehran fully controls what Russia decides to do next. And this is no longer a bilateral crisis. The mechanism that prevents de-escalation is now locked into place on both sides. Iran's coordinated strike triggered American massive retaliation doctrine that has been established since the 1980s. Operation Iron Fury will trigger Iranian regional response, which is their stated doctrine. Iranian regional response will trigger potential Strait of Hormuz closure, which is their primary leverage point over the entire global economy. Hormuz closure triggers a global economic crisis and NATO involvement, given that 21% of global oil transit moves through that waterway. Both sides are now locked into an action-reaction spiral with no exit ramps that are currently visible to anyone watching from the outside. Here is what this means for you personally, regardless of where you live. If you buy gasoline, $127 oil means $6 plus gas within weeks, and that is only if Hormuz stays open. If Iran closes the strait even temporarily, oil moves above $200, and your fuel cost doubles within a month. That is before heating oil prices spike, before shipping costs increase on every product you buy, before every item that moves by truck becomes more expensive to deliver to the store shelf. If you have retirement investments, markets will react Monday morning with potential 2008-style volatility. Defense stocks are up across the sector, everything else is uncertain. If you are active duty or have family serving, stop-loss orders are possible within days, and deployment extensions are already under discussion at the Pentagon. The active clocks running right now tell the whole story of what the next 48 hours look like. Operation Iron Fury's first wave is approximately 6 hours away. The House emergency session is 15 hours away. The Iranian counterstrike response window opens at 30 hours. The Israeli independent decision point arrives somewhere between 36 and 48 hours from now, and that last clock may be the most dangerous one of all. Netanyahu has stated publicly that Iran's nuclear program must be addressed now or never. If American strikes degrade Iranian air defenses significantly enough, Israel may launch an independent strike on nuclear facilities at Fordow and Natanz. That triggers direct Iranian response against Israel. That triggers Hezbollah activation from Lebanon. That is regional war across 5 countries simultaneously. And Israel's decision is not controlled by Washington. No de-escalation signals are coming from any party right now. By Monday evening, we will know whether the strikes were limited or comprehensive, whether Iran hit Gulf state allies, whether Russia engaged or simply observed, and whether Israel acted independently. Every single answer changes the next question that follows it. Tonight is the decision point.